Hello and welcome to this launch event of the Leith School of Art Resilience Campaign with our target of £100,000 to support our plans to thrive beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. My name's Nick Devison. I'm the principal of Leith School of Art and I'm talking to you here tonight from our beautiful North Junction Street studios, which were formerly the Norwegian Seamen's Church built in 1868. You can see the lovely stained glass windows behind me. Which are currently the printmaking area of our main studio here, which is where I first started teaching in the school back in 2016. Before becoming principal in 2020. As you may know, Leith School of Art was founded in 1988 by artists Mark and Lottie Cheverton as an independent art school with charitable status. We continue today with their vision of an art school which offers an inclusive and nurturing environment and a commitment to widening opportunities for students regardless of social or financial background. We support this cause through a number of initiatives, including our schools outreach programme, which provides classes for pupils from disadvantaged backgrounds, our community classes, which provide courses for people on low income or in receipt of benefits, and our assisted places scheme, which provides financial support for students on our year-long courses who may be facing financial difficulty. So what's the Resilience Campaign about? Well, the COVID-19 pandemic of the last 12 months or so has been incredibly challenging for all of us, and Leith School of Art is no exception. We responded with a range of measures, including implementation of strict COVID distancing and the adoption of new and innovative online teaching resources to support our students. All of this ensured that we didn't lose a single day of teaching to the pandemic or incur a single case of COVID within the school. Importantly, though, we learned how to adapt and invest to support our students through an incredibly challenging period. However, these innovations have also come at a tremendous cost and have put our financial resources under a strain which now threatens our ability to grow and develop as we would like. This is why we're turning to you, our supporters, to ask you to help us to build resilience, enabling us to expand our current work, whilst also developing ambitious plans to allow us to adapt and thrive in the future. So we start this campaign tonight with an exciting overview of what we do through testimonials from our staff and students. In just a moment, we'll hear from Jenny Martin, our longest serving member of staff, who's going to give us a perspective of the school from a teaching point of view. Jenny will then hand over to Emma Russell, who's currently studying at the Fine Art at the University of Dundee and graduated from the foundation course here in the summer of 2020, which eclipsed the first part of the lockdown last year. And our special treat, of course, we'll hear about the importance of art school experience from our distinguished artist, printmaker and designer, Angie Lewin, who'll be in conversation with my colleague, Dr Andrew Paterson. And to conclude the evening, we'll have a few words of support from our chair, Alistair Hector. I do hope you enjoy the evening, and I very much hope soon that we'll be able to meet you in person in the school. Thank you. I'll pass over now to Jenny.
Hello. So I've just had a quick look at the list of people who are here, and I recognise an awful lot of you. And most of you who I recognise will know that I have been at the school for 21 years. I joined the school in 2000 and started to teach on some part-time classes and also to run the summer school and all of the what are now called the short courses, which were in those days called the part-time classes. And I have continued to work at the school with a couple of breaks for maternity for 21 years. And I've done lots and lots of different things in that time. I've taught and managed all the short courses, taught on the short courses. I've developed quite a lot of work at the school, developed some of the year-long courses, helped to open the second campus at St James, managed quite a lot of staff, and now I teach on the foundation course. So I've got a very sort of long and sort of broad sort of a relationship really and understanding of what the school is, what it's been through, and in a lot of senses what it's facing. I feel like a lot of you who can see me currently on the screen, I know that I've worked with quite a lot of you. I've taught quite a lot of you as well over the years. And I'm sure you all know that I am incredibly committed to the school. I really believe in what the school does and what the school offers. And that's really kind of why I've stayed. I haven't left. I've kind of altered the job that I've done maybe within the school over the years to fit with things like my family and my art practice. But I really value the things that the school stand for. And I think that those things that were really important to the school when I joined in 2000 are still really important to the school now, 21 years later, and I think will continue to be important to the school for the next foreseeable future of the school. And I think there's so much that the school offers that you don't find in a lot of places, you don't find in a lot of big institutions. And I think sort of funding situations maybe, and I don't know, cultural issues have kind of edged quite a lot of that out of a lot of places. And within Leith School of Art, I think that we've really hung on to our sense of community and our valuing of our students and our staff. We've really hung on to our focus and emphasis on teaching, which we are really committed to and have absolutely put sort of front and centre of what the school does, and a real sense of care for each individual student, whether they're a student on one of our community outreach classes or a Tuesday evening class, right through to a student who might be doing a graduate residency or on the foundation course. And each individual student is incredibly important to us as the school, whether we're a teacher or a member of the administration department. And I think that is very unique and very, very special. And that is one of the reasons why I think that Leith School of Art is incredibly special. I think over the years, we've faced a lot and we've overcome a lot. And I was thinking back to some of the things that the school had faced, and I think probably the biggest thing in my time at the school was the fire in the back studio, which some of you will remember, which sort of decimated the back studio. You could see the sky through the roof. And we were told by the fire brigade that if we'd been 10 minutes later, the whole building might have been burnt down. And that was a big challenge that we overcame. And it took a lot of hard work and persistence and faith, really, in that we could rebuild the school to kind of get over that, and we did. But I think that the challenge that the school is facing now is equally as big, if not bigger than that challenge. I think that this last year has posed so many challenges for the school. It's really threatened to threaten the sense of community that the school really depends on, with our students all having to learn remotely in their bedrooms or in their living rooms. It's threatened the school's financial situation because we've had to reduce our student numbers and in some cases had to cancel some classes, some part-time classes. But it's also had a really big impact on our students' mental health as well, particularly those students who may be living alone and who used to enjoy coming into the school to meet other people. That's been a big challenge. And so I've really noticed that as a tutor on the foundation course. We've been working all the time with our students, but it's been really difficult for them working on their own. They've done really, really well, but it's been a really difficult year. They've found it very hard to make interesting or sort of challenging work within the confines, in some cases, of a very small space. Some people live in student accommodation and it's been really quite difficult for them. And they've struggled with their mental health as well, as I think a lot of people have during this pandemic. It's really important for us that we are able to get back into the school. We will be going back into the school next week, and we're really looking forward to that. But I think it's really important for us to have a strong foundation to build on. This pandemic has posed huge challenges to our financial footing and also to just rebuild some of the community that we had. And so I feel like there are big challenges ahead. I think that the staff are fantastic and we can definitely do it. But you as supporters, I think, are really important. Some of you, maybe would just come to exhibitions or come to events at the school. You've not been able to do that. But we really hope that you will come with us on this next journey of the school and really help us to kind of build up our kind of I suppose, our values again, to kind of be able to really do what we want to do in the studios, which is, I think, where we work best. And it's been good, but I'm really looking forward to getting back into the studio. And I think I'll stop talking there. But it's nice to see all your faces. Oh, I'm supposed to hand over to Emma now. I was thinking that Nick was going to do that. So yeah, actually, sorry, I do apologise. So Emma is going to talk to you next, and she is our student from last year. So she was a student on the foundation course who started when we didn't have any inkling of what was coming. And she came into the foundation course from Ireland, where she's from Donegal, and she started our foundation course, was doing really well, doing some really exciting work. We went through all the application process, and she began to get invited for interviews, and then the lockdown hit and she had to go back to Ireland, and we taught the remainder of the course with Emma in lockdown. And some of you might have seen some of the work that she did. She took over Instagram for one of her videos. So I'm going to introduce her now to you, and she'll tell you a little bit about what that was like and what her experience was of being a student on the course during the last year. So this is Emma Russell, who was on our foundation course and is now at Duncan of Jordanstone doing fine art.
Yep.
Sorry, Emma.
You're okay. Hi everyone. So I'm Emma, and as Jenny said, I was on the foundation course at LSA last year. Also, I'm now studying fine art at Duncan of Jordanstone up in Dundee. And I can say for definite, I would not be in the course I'm in now if it weren't for the foundation course and all its lovely tutors at LSA. So yeah, a bit of background on me. I'm from Ireland, and I moved to Edinburgh to attend the course when I was 18. At the time, I knew no one in the city, and believe it or not, I was quite shy. And I remember being really nervous for the first day. Those initial nerves, however, were immediately put at ease due to how kind and welcoming everyone was. The tutors were so keen to cultivate a friendly environment, especially in the first few weeks, when the group didn't really know each other. Without a doubt, the tutors made it clear that they were not just there to teach, but to create this lovely sense of community within the group. I think the fact that the majority of the group are still so incredibly close speaks volumes for the community spirit in LSA. What immediately springs to mind is how in the first week of school, we all went on a trip to Portobello Beach. Not only were we taught the essential artistic skills, such as how to draw on location, but the tutors also organised a bonfire, which was the start of so many friendships for me and made it so much easier to settle into Edinburgh. Little did I know that was the beginning to so many more bonding experiences with this fantastic group. A standout experience for me at the time was definitely the group trip to the Isle of Skye just a few weeks in. Now, make no mistake, before coming to Edinburgh, the prospect of spending a week away with a group of strangers terrified me. But by the time it rolled around, it was all anyone in the school was talking about. And it was a full week of hilarious memories and fun life lessons. It was there that my friendships really blossomed with the rest of the course, and I knew that I had made the right decision in choosing LSA for my foundation year. Looking back, I think I would be so lost without the tight-knit community at LSA. I was so nervous at the start, but immediately felt so supported by all the staff in the school, whether that be the tutors or the technicians. I felt like I could go up and approach any of them with any problems, and throughout the year, if there was ever a problem, I was able to go to them, and they were able to deal with it in a calm and comforting way. And I really appreciated that. It really added to my experience of the course. I went onto the course straight out of secondary school, and I was always torn between whether to study art or maths in university. I actually remember chatting to Jenny about this, as at the time I was really worried about this uncertainty, but she was so supportive and gave me really good advice. I'm sure all of you who have been to the school will know Leith School of Art is not a place where you walk right through reception to the studio. It's a place for at least me. It's a place where you go in, have a wee chat to whoever's about, make yourself a cup of tea and really feel at home. It's a real sense of community and inclusivity. Before moving to Edinburgh, I was really nervous about losing my support network of family and friends, but without a doubt, LSA stepped in and the people there were like my second family when I was away from home. By creating such a welcoming and nurturing environment in LSA, the tutors had created a space where we could push the boundaries in terms of our artistic knowledge and potential. At LSA, nothing is off the table, and I would not have realised that fine art was for me without the vast experience in different specialities I was able to practice at LSA. As my tutors know, my portfolio to get into the course was pretty much just drawings of my cat. And they were lovely drawings, but the course really opened up the world of art for me and made me realise that I could be good at many things and that my artistic expression did not need to be limited to only one outlet, but indeed, the more the better. I remember talking to a friend in the first week and telling them that I really liked sculpture, but I never thought it was something I could do. Throughout the first few weeks, my eyes were open to how much I was actually capable of, as we got the opportunity to try out so many different artistic practices. Our weekly art history lecture laid a contextual foundation to what we were creating and showed me so many fantastic artists who continue to inspire me. At the beginning of the course, I didn't have much confidence in my work and found it quite difficult to speak about the inspiration and development of my pieces. However, the tutors were fantastic in pushing me out of my comfort zone, helping me to expand my artistic understanding and horizons, as well as developing a rich vocabulary to discuss my art and just how much it means to me. I find myself often drawing on those I went to LSA with for inspiration this year, as we often call to discuss our artwork and future projects. This has been especially important this year, as like many others in a new university, I've been unable to meet many of my new classmates, and would be lost without the virtual support network I have with my friends who I met at LSA. So all was smooth sailing until about March of last year. It was hard to go from annoying the tutors 4 days a week in the studio with access to everything to complete lockdown. Remote learning was completely new for everyone, but it was extra complicated to teach an art course to students all around the world who had little to no materials. However, the tutors were fantastic and almost overnight devised a solid online teaching structure, setting weekly tasks to keep us focused and daily meetings with the team. A critical part of art school is learning from and engaging with the other students. This was not lost during our lockdown term, as we had many group crits and a shared folder to upload all our art to. Despite it all, I still had a really positive experience during that time, and this was largely due to the routine structure the tutors had set out. Unlike many of my other friends who felt isolated and cut off from their university, the same could not be said about LSA. The tutors were really encouraging of us trying out new things, and despite being in another country, there was such a strong sense of community. Even the fact that we could still come together at the end of the year to create such a wonderful exhibition is a testament to just how much a young group of artists can achieve when they have support and encouragement of their tutors. It would have been very easy for the tutors to cut us all off from the community in LSA and to leave us all to our own devices. But the fact that they themselves were so resilient and adaptable inspired us all to be the same and to create some of our best work reflective of the world around us. With this whole pandemic, we are facing such a critical moment in the art scene. Funding for art is being cut, the art unis are closed, places for creating art such as printmakers and studios are shut and deemed non-essential. I think the pandemic has shown me how little people seem to think that they need art, or that art is something that can be somehow pushed away until a later date or until the pubs are open. They don't realise how entangled art is with life. It's impossible to go 5 minutes without looking at something that an artist hasn't been involved in. But on the flip side, I think the pandemic has shown how now more than ever, how important it is to come together and to support the creatives. We need to support these young artists who, due to the pandemic, feel as if their art has no value in this ever-changing environment. It's crucial to come together and to support LSA at this time, a place where young artists are created and built up, ready to face this ever-changing and chaotic world. I think, if anything, LSA has illustrated that the artistic community is a resilient one. We are constantly adapting, changing, overcoming problems that we face. And I think if that's not reason enough to continue to support LSA at this time, I don't know what is. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you, Emma. That was really inspiring. Well, folks, you won't have to put up with me for too long. I'm just doing a quick bridging thing as we move to the highlight of tonight's event, where we meet Angie Lewin, who'll be in conversation with my colleague, Andrew Paterson. So I'll hand over now to Andrew, will give a full introduction for Angie. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. Angie and I are going to be talking for half an hour or so. But before we start the conversation, just to say you're very welcome to put your own questions to Angie as we go along, if anything occurs to you that you'd like to ask. If you'd like to do that, please type them into the chat box. I'm sure you're familiar with chat boxes. And hopefully we'll have some time at the end for Angie to answer at least a few of them. Okay, so please do type something in. Now, Angie has prepared a rather wonderful sequence of slides for us. So while she shares her screen, I'll give you a brief introduction to her and her work. Well, Angie Lewin is one of this country's most accomplished printmakers. She trained at the Central School of Art and Design in London in the 1980s, specializing in printmaking from the word go. And after initially working in London as an illustrator, she moved to Norfolk, where her career as a printmaker really began to take off. And much of Angie's work has been inspired by two contrasting landscapes. The cliff tops and salt marshes of North Norfolk, and also the Spey Valley in the Scottish Highlands, from where she is speaking to us this evening. And as you'll see, she has focused on their native flora in particular. And for the last few years, she's actually been based in Edinburgh. And here she has created her own garden, which has also become a source of inspiration in its own right. Her work is highly versatile in terms of media and techniques, as again, I'm sure you'll see, including wood engraving, lino cut, silkscreen, lithography, and collage. She's completed commissions for Liberties, Conran Octopus, and Penguin Books, among others. And she is the co-founder with her husband, Simon, of St. Jude's Prints, for which she has designed a range of fabrics and wallpapers. She has had numerous exhibitions of her work since the 1980s, the most recent of which some of you may have seen. It was a major solo show at the Scottish Gallery in Edinburgh last October, which fortunately enough opened during the gap between lockdowns and was hugely successful. So Angie, your first two slides are just give an idea of the range of your work, don't they? Would you like to just talk us through these four images?
Yes, yeah. I just want to say, first of all, thanks very much for inviting me to take part in this fundraising event, which I'm very, very pleased to do. Yeah, the two slides on the screen at the moment are, the left-hand one is a wood engraving called Spanish Seed Heads. As Andrew said, I work in various different print processes. And the right-hand image is a watercolour, which was in my recent Scottish Gallery exhibition, which depicts a coffee pot by Eric Revilius, who I'm sort of going to talk about inspirations. He was a huge inspiration to me as a person that works in different media. He successfully worked as an exhibiting artist and as a designer, and that's what I find very exciting as an artist, to see my imagery translated into different media. And the next slide, on the left-hand side, it's a wallpaper, a clover wallpaper, which actually came originally from a tiny wood engraving, which I then create a repeat pattern to create a wallpaper. And although I trained as a fine artist, I like to work across different media, and I'm going to talk about art schools, and that's what is so fascinating about going to art school, is you'll see other processes that inspire you, and being able to cross over is just it's an opportunity that's a really great opportunity to grasp if you're able to. So me and my husband Simon set up St. Jude's for my wallpapers, and well, initially textiles, but now we do wallpapers as well, but also with other artists who aren't naturally textile designers. We collaborate with them to enable them to produce work as textiles, because I didn't train as a textile artist. It was a bit of a learning curve, but it was really enjoyable. And on the right-hand side is a book jacket for Penguin. And I do some illustration. It tends to be illustration that kind of relates to my own work. So I'm kind of not a true illustrator in that I think a great illustrator, like someone like Edward Ardisoni or someone like that, whatever they draw is great in their style. For me, my illustration is always relates to the landscape, to the plant forms that I love, and so it all kind of fits together somehow. So
Yeah,
that's kind of to show you the sort of range of what I do.
Yeah. And I just get the sense immediately that we're talking about a whole network of collaboration, and that art is that for you, that it's not a solitary endeavor, that it involves so many other people. And I know your next slide relates to your own experience of art school at the Central School in London. Can you talk to us about that particular print first of all? I think it's a marvelous image.
Just a moment, sorry. Yeah, the image I'm going to show you is of the Central School. So my tech support is dashing into the room. Why is that not happening? What happened?
There you are. You've done it.
Turn it on again, moment. Sorry about that. So this image is a very large wood engraving, which they discovered the block while I was in the printmaking department at Central, where I studied. And it's by an artist called Harry Perry. Heather, who was actually called Heather Perry, but she called herself Harry Perry. Not particularly well known. She did a lot of posters that actually people might recognise. And I've shown this because it shows why art schools are amazing places and very, very valuable to us all, because it just shows as a student, I think she did this as a student, and it depicts, it's quite an eccentric building, the old Central School, which is obviously now empty and possibly going to be a boutique hotel, which sounds appalling, doesn't it? But it's such an amazing building in the way that Leith School of Art is a very, very beautiful building. And it shows all the students in all the different departments. It implies collaboration, activity, people being inspired by what they see around. And that's how I sort of felt when I arrived at Central. I fell in love with the building, and I actually did start as a sculptor. But I only did that for a few weeks because we had to do a printmaking, a month of printmaking. And as soon as I walked into the printmaking department, which was actually on the very top floor when I was there, but in this image, it's a bit lower down. I realized it was printmaking that I wanted to do, but it was that crossover that through me being shown the printmaking department, I immediately gravitated towards it. And it was decided that, and also I was not a very good sculptor. To be really honest, I wasn't very good in 3D. So I got all the tools, the presses, the inks, all of those things really inspired me. So I kind of decided to transfer to a different department.
Right. And what do you think were the most valuable things you took from art school that are still valuable to you today?
I think a lot of the things Emma and Jenny have said,
right.
Emma particularly had said, it's that being around other students who you're learning together, you're seeing what they're achieving. It's a bit like if you're learning a language on your own, or if you're learning a language in a group, you gain so much more from being aware of what other people are doing. It gives you space to think, you can observe. The tutors were great at Central. One of my tutors was Bernard Cheese, who was although I didn't particularly know it at the time, actually a very successful illustrator. And he helped me when I got my first illustration commission, which actually came from an MA student who'd just left and seen me work in the print department. So that got me a job doing a design for an ad agency in London. So it all kind of, there's a lot of crossover, which I found really inspiring, that you'd learn from the other students a great deal. There was a great Japanese woodcut artist who came to do an MA, who I got to know really well, and her work was just fantastic, absolutely fantastic. And she was really generous with her, you know, knowledge. So you just got this sense of being part of a community for which art is a natural way that you might live, or might be part of your life, and you could aspire to have a creative life, have an art life in the art world, which I didn't come from that sort of background. So it was great to be somewhere where it was normal, I suppose.
Yeah. So you actually acquire a self-belief. Would you say that you didn't have when you arrived? I can do this. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that, you know, a friend's son once said, my friend from school, when we met when we were 11, and she's a GP, her little boy said, when I said, when his mum said, what do you want to be when you grow up? He said, well, actually, I want to be an artist, but when I grow up, I want to be a doctor like you. So there's almost that viewpoint of art not being, I say from the point of view of little boys, that's rather an odd thing to say, but I think there was a thing where, certainly from my background, it wasn't really a proper job. I'm still not entirely sure it is, but it is a very valid way to live, and it's so valuable to society as well.
Absolutely.
So,
I think this is a fantastic print. I'm really glad you included, because it does remind me of Leith School of Art. In the in normal times, it's heaving with people, and they're all interacting and influencing and inspiring each other in completely incalculable ways. And I think that's what is exciting, isn't it?
You discover things you don't know about. You end up talking to an industrial designer, or maybe not at Leith, but maybe at Central, or a textile artist, or a printmaker, or someone on the foundation course. We'll be talking to someone doing the painting course. You crossing over, and I think that's really, it can't be achieved anywhere else in the same way.
Sure. One of the things I find remarkable about your work, Angie, is that there's such a strong sense of continuity all through from art school to the present day. Your sense of what you're interested in has really been there all the way through. So I'm just wondering, what would you say are the sources of that, the sources of inspiration that have been so constant?
Well, it's basically the landscape. I've always spent a lot of time outdoors, even as a very young child. So all my work for basically pretty much my entire life, but specifically probably since the 90s, I've been doing so much work based on the landscape, particularly when I left London in the late 90s. I moved to North Norfolk, and I would do the same walk along the cliff tops. It just became such a source of inspiration every single day. So that's my main starting point, though my garden is also very important to me, increasingly so. But this image actually sort of sums up another reason why I think the landscape is important in my work, that when I was, and also how important your early life is in how you develop as an artist, is that at primary school, this is a watercolour by Albert Dürer called The Great Turf, and it sums up, when I was at primary school, we were given this project, we each given this sort of wooden quadrant, and he had to put it on the ground in the school playing fields in the sort of wild, unmown area, and just count the different plants and insects within this little square, which is about probably 2 feet, 3 feet square. And I just remember this vividly. And it's just so obvious that now that my work is so influenced by that. This is a piece of work from probably 2013 called Goat's Beard and Grasses. And this, again, it's almost like this sitting on the ground looking into the plants, and often sort of insignificant plants and weeds and things like that. So it does sort of show how I think early childhood inspires work, you know. And actually, when I was at primary school, and this is a different era, me and a friend who also ended up going to art school, we used to go walking and sketching when we were probably 9 or 10 years old, we just go off with a picnic and sketchbooks and just go drawing. So I've always spent a lot of time, you know, outdoors, and
did that carry on through art school? Were you still interested in plants as a subject, or did you detour to other things and then come back to it?
I did detour because when I got into Central, I used to do environmental sculptures on foundation. I used to go out into forests and wrap trees with cloth and all sorts of things like that. And they say, you're going to be okay in Central London because there isn't a lot of, and I was saying, oh, we used to be absolutely fine. But so in London, I found myself doing things. I would go off to the V&A and explore the V&A and draw. I became obsessed with Japanese armor and the process of making Japanese kites and all sorts of things like that, which I suppose that was crossing over into textiles and things like that. So I did have a bit, but I'd always do a lot of sketching. I'd always go out sketching, whether it was in markets in Brixton or when I was out in the country, I would draw. So it's always been a theme running through.
And in terms of artistic influences, you've already mentioned one or two names like Ardizoni and so on. So do you see yourself as belonging to a certain tradition, or is it a matter of individuals that you really relate to?
I think I feel a link with artists that are artist and designer, and at that period after the Second World War and the Festival of Britain, when artists crossed over into doing posters and textiles. And there were companies, actually I might just jump forward a couple here. Artists like Edward Borden, who's on the right-hand side, who did the tree and cow wallpaper. But on the left-hand side, we've got Ben Nicholson. And artists like Nicholson and Moore and Sutherland and Piper, and actually Alan Reynolds, who I'll skip back to, who did this sort of cornfield scene. They seem to cross over into the applied arts and the fine arts. And I've never seen a problem with it. And I think that is getting better. And I know that that was done out of financial necessity.
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting that you link it to that specific period when the whole country was recovering from a terrible crisis.
Yes.
That a lot of artists were suddenly ranging across a whole lot of media. And I wonder if there's a parallel with today in a funny sort of way.
Well, I think there's a sort of parallel in that I think because people, there's very little good, obviously, that you could possibly say about the COVID pandemic, but people that have lost jobs, but people that have been furloughed or are working from home, there has been this resurgence in craft, in making, and people are thinking, well, they are fine. They have had the time to do these things through adversity. They've had the chance to do these things. So it is different, but it is interesting that, I think people have become more creative, things that they just haven't had the time to do. And partly, I think also because of what we're going through, people think, actually, why shouldn't I do it? Yeah, people are discovering their gardens more and the creativity that comes from gardening and the environment. So yeah, I think there was that thing that I don't think into it too good part, but there is definitely that thing coming out of the Second World War, this resurgence in very different approach to art and design. If you see some of the things that were created for the Festival of Britain, they were really, really quite quirky, quite strange, quite challenging, and actually not necessarily things that we produce now even. So
yeah, maybe we need another Festival of Britain. Or, well, I'm not sure. That could be taken in different ways, couldn't it?
Yeah, I do feel like I look back a lot, actually. But it is one thing I would have loved to have gone to the Festival of Britain. I think it would have been an amazing thing. And with hindsight, you would then look back and think, wow, all those artists that did the murals, the furniture, the textiles, it was a fantastic thing. Did
you want to go back to the Alan Reynolds briefly, or
yeah,
why did you choose that in particular?
I chose that because, again, that was another sort of reference to how important early influences are. And when I was doing my sixth form, my A-level art, my school really did not value art. was very, very academic girls' grammar, and it was really not great to do A-level art. And we had amazing tutor called Mrs. Rigby, who booked a coach to take us to London to go to Tate,
yeah,
it is now. And she actually accidentally booked a 60-seater coach for 6 girls, incredibly badly, apart from with us. And we all went down to London, and I just saw this painting. I just thought, I just loved it. And I got the postcard. I've still got the same postcard now. And it wasn't until a few years, maybe early 2000s, someone said, you know, you must really love Alan Reynolds' work. And I said, oh, I've not really don't know much about him. And then I just started looking at my work and thinking,
yeah, that's
is quite profound, actually. And surprisingly, he also had designed textiles and things for possibly for Edinburgh Weavers. I can't remember who it was for, but again, he'd done that sort of crossover thing. Yeah, so I just think the things you see early on in life are very important. And a few years ago, I curated an exhibition in Hampshire, and I was asked to select work from different museums and galleries, and we asked Tate if we could have that painting in my exhibition, and they did loan it.
Oh, good.
And I was actually quite frightened to see it because I hadn't seen it for so long. And actually, when it arrived, it was so much bigger than I thought. They're absolutely enormous. So that was really quite scary. But there's actually, you can't quite see it. Well, if the images of us is down the side, you maybe can't see. There's a dandelion clock off to one side, and the teasers and everything. I suddenly realised how much I had been influenced by it.
Yeah, so. Yeah, I can see that. Now, I'm sure a lot of the audience are desperate to know more about your creative process, because it looks incredibly intricate and involved, both in printmaking and in watercolor for that matter. So I know you've got a little sequence of slides here. Could you just talk us through the different kind? It seems to me printmaking, as a non-printmaker myself, it seems to involve a different way of thinking from painting, for instance. Would you say that?
Yes, it does. I think it does, because when I started to do my watercolors in a more serious sort of way, as I describe it, and exhibit them, I thought there was quite a gulf between the two. In fact, as I'm doing more paintings, I think there isn't such a difference. But I think the initial mindset is, as a printmaker, you're thinking about process all the time. Yeah. And the way that I do prints. So even when I'm out sketching and drawing, I tend to reduce the number of colours that I'm using. Right. Sort of even subconsciously, as though, well, you know, if I'm doing a lino print, I really won't want more than 4 colours, because, you know, each colour is cut as a separate block, or a screen might have 7 colours if it's a screen print. So I think you do automatically start to kind of rationalise how you do your sketches, because you know, in preparation for the transformation it's going to go through.
So what?
And then you're.
Sorry, carry on.
Oh no, carry on.
I was just going to say, what are we looking at here? Is this a sort of step beyond the initial sketching outdoors? Yes,
it is. I mean, I think sometimes I take out a little watercolor block, which I think those 2 small ones which are lying on top are actually taken out of sketches that I did do outdoors. And then the big one, I think, is a preparatory drawing for screen print that I did. Yes, because it's getting more kind of organized in the way I'm working out the numbers of colors, and also starting to think about, well, if there are 2 sorts of purple, or if the purple overlays the green, those sort of circles on the green, what sort of colors am I going to get? So I'm already starting to plan the print, and I'll also draw it out the size of the block or screen, so that I've got a template to trace from and then transfer it onto the block. And although this isn't the print those drawings are for, it is based on those sketches and screen print that I did. So it's basically grasses and plantains, yellow rattle and scabious down by the River Spey, which is near where I am at the moment.
Right.
And this also sort of shows how what I love about printmaking is that you do your initial sketch or painting, but what develops from that is so different. And that's the joy of it. You're not trying to ever emulate your painting or sketch. You're trying to create the best print that you can.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you have your sketch, you transfer it onto the block, you trace it down, you paint it, you then cut it, which is already transformed a drawn line to a cut line. And then you ink it and then you print it, so it then transforms to a printed element, so that everything transforms it. And then when you take your pull from the print, you then think, well, now you respond to that. You leave the drawing behind and you just respond.
It takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think it's just the most, and all the printmaking techniques have their own qualities. So you have the graphic quality of relief printing. The more with screen printing, you have more. Yeah, and that's another line. Actually, with screen printing, you show more drawn elements. So you know you can sort of take each process has its different qualities, which you kind of you can run with that transform your original drawing. That makes sense.
So how do you balance your work between the different disciplines? Do you have a whole year of engraving, or are you just doing different things every day, or do you really get into one technique to explore it further? And then
I think I tend to move between them quite quickly. So I would tend, quite often what I do, I think, is maybe do a couple of wood engravings. Then I think, oh, you know, I really fancy working big. So then you scale up. Yeah. Sometimes it's down to if I'm given a commission or something, if there's a book jacket, or if, because when I do screen prints, I sometimes put my own screen prints, but not so often really. Mostly they're editioned for me. So I go and work with a master printer who editions for me. And so if there's a slot available to do that, then I will do that. And I really enjoy moving between the two. I'm amazed by, and I really admire people that stick to one process actually. You know, wood engravers that only wood engrave in black and white and are so skillful at it. You know, I do really admire that. But I think partly because of early influences and things, I like to do lots of different things. I like to see my imagery, because my imagery is fairly consistent. But apply it across. But it
evolves from one medium to another. Yeah. Could you, this one, again, as I say, as a non-printmaker, this is almost overwhelmingly complex looking, and I can't imagine quite how you know, the actual stages of the process. Could you take us through step by step with a piece like this?
Yeah, well, I would have started off like the original sketches that we saw of the scabious things. I would start off with an original drawing to scale of the block. And this is quite a big lino cut, as you can sort of see by the scale of it. It's probably, must be 50 odd by 40 odd or something. It's quite big for me. It's as big as my press can take. So I draw that all out and also marking where the colours will go. But it is a bit fluid, it can change. And then that image is transferred in reverse onto the block, and then I start to cut. So it's an old Sunderland ware jug that a friend gave me called the Gardener's Arms. And I create the still life. And then just I draw it quite well on the paper, but I really concentrate on drawing it onto the block, because that's what I'm going to be cutting. So I draw it out quite carefully. I mean, other printmakers are more loose in the way that they do it. But even though I plan it, it changes so much. You know, it really, really does. And then, so I'll print the black, the linear block generally is the more, almost like the key block. And then I'll create the other colours. I'll offset that block onto the next lino, blank lino blocks to cut them. For each colour, there'll be a separate block. So I think there's about 7 blocks for this one.
Sure.
I think 2 colours are in one block, so that kind of helps a bit. But right. yeah, I get very caught up in the process.
Absolutely. Well, we'll come on to that from the sort of teaching, because I know you have taught students these processes as well, and we'll come on to that. I just wondered about the watercolors, because this, yes, your last slide with the auriculars.
Yeah.
This is very recent work, isn't it? And were you showing that you were showing these last year, weren't you, at the Scottish Gallery? And were these lockdown pieces of work or before? I can't remember.
They were lockdown pieces, yeah.
Right. And how does the process?
Actually,
how does the process vary from the printmaking to this, or are you thinking they're all coming together? They're all converging into one? Yeah,
I think there are more links than I thought, because there's that lovely freedom that you get with a piece of paper where you can have as many colours as you want, which initially I found incredibly hard to deal with. It made me so indecisive, and I could never work out whether the paintings were finished or not. Because there's something about a print, the way that I think about it, you can almost plan it, and there may be an extra block or two, or you may cut more areas away than you think, but it's kind of, there's a structure to it. There are constraints that give you your parameters, whereas with painting that just isn't there. But actually, maybe because I've been doing more watercolors, that's been less of an issue. And also I've realized I do use a lot of stencils, as I do with printmaking. Lots of areas are masked out, so the pattern on the jug, on the pot on the right hand side, the white circles and patterns are all masked off with masking fluid and then watercolor over the top. I'm also using lots of spattering and textures, so there is that set, and there's lots of layering as well with my watercolors, so that it's not as different as I thought it was somehow. But these are definitely lockdown pieces, because I couldn't come up to Speyside, which is where I spend a lot of my time. I couldn't come up here for, it was about 3 or 4 months really. So I just had what was in the garden. I sort of was going to go out sketching on Blackford Hill and things like that, but then I just found it wasn't, I don't know, I think it was the effect of lockdown. I just loved being in the little back garden. And so I had these auriculars growing, and in fact they flowered perfectly at the end of March through April and into the beginning of May. So, and I'd never looked after them so well because I was at home all the time. So I had all these auriculars to paint. So yeah, these were some of the first ones I did once lockdown happened.
So yeah, I know you were telling me the other day about your experience as a teacher in, well, Edinburgh Printmakers, for instance, or other places as well. You've taken a group of students through a very structured process. Yeah. So I wondered, what do you think students gain from learning to follow something as structured as that?
Well, I think as a teacher, I like to teach process. I found that easier. And I think as a student and as an artist, I find structure really helpful. I find it a very freeing thing, because as I was sort of saying with the watercolors, you know, sometimes with the painting, it's almost like you don't know when I find it quite hard to know when to stop, what the boundaries are. And I find that when you're printmaking, there are all these different stages and you have different mindsets at different stages. So I find when people do wood engraving, whether they're, you know, practicing artists, they may have a style and a way of working, which is inevitably very different to wood engraving. It's very small scale, very fine. And so they have their original sketch or watercolor or painting. And once they start to cut, as I was sort of saying before, you go with it. You like it has to be the best print it can. So they become caught up in the process, and they see the way that their drawn line is transformed, and they just move on from there. It's also very useful, I think, if somebody is coming into art, having had a break or for the first time. Yeah. Where you can be very self-conscious about your drawing ability, about your skills as an artist. Is this good? Well, actually, you can create the quality of a print has a quality of its own. It gives something to your work, which you know you may not have imagined. And then I think that is very, very beneficial. It's really positive. So I think people really enjoy that. There's something almost childlike about it actually, you know, when you're learning a new process. And then I find that people then go in different directions with it. Some people start to print lots and lots and lots, especially if they're not printed multiples before, which is something I love, is to produce multiples. And then they start to print them in a few colours, then make repeat patterns. Or they decide, oh, actually, you know, so they I think they find the limitations quite liberating.
Quite freeing, yeah. It's paradoxical, isn't it? Yeah. But that was really interesting what you said about someone coming along to a course like that, having been sort of disconnected from art for a long time, for whatever reason, and they're trying to reconnect with it after a gap of decades, maybe, because we get a lot of people like that coming to courses at Leith. And it's always very interesting to hear that story of, you know, how did they get disconnected? Did they have an art teacher at school who said something negative to them, or you know, whatever? But the idea of coming to a process first, which they just follow, you think it's a sort of restricting thing, but in fact it just has the opposite effect in an interesting way.
Because you can cut something really well or print it really well, and that is a success.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And also, you know, that quality of print is always satisfying. It's graphic, it's strong. And I think that is very useful when you're either starting for the first time or just getting back into it again. Because, you know, I mean, I've been really fortunate to have been worked as an artist all the way through, pretty much.
Yeah, right.
And I think it's so important that people should try and regain it if they've lost it, because you know, or try and get it if they were put off at school, which happens to so many people, you know, that or circumstances change and then they can't, you know, pursue a creative career. It's important.
So, I mean, in a way, this whole theme of freedom brings us back to lockdown again, and because you were saying, you know, can you imagine trying to teach a wood engraving class when everybody's got masks on and you wanting to lean over each other's shoulders to see that your millimeter thick line and all the rest of it, and it's just not feasible.
No. I mean,
I mean, as an artist yourself, what do you feel? What have you most felt the lack of during lockdown? You haven't had to stop working, but what have you felt the lack of?
I think when lockdown happened, I actually felt very disorientated by it. I think, well, as everybody did, but you'd think, well, what's the difference? You know, I worked at home mostly, apart from occasionally being at Edinburgh Printmakers and things like that. And but you do the interactions face to face with friends and fellow artists, where you talk about your work, when you go into exhibitions and see actual art on the walls. That's something that, you know, you really, really miss. And I also, that sense that the world goes on around you. As an artist, I think you can be quite cocooned, so you'll work away at home in the studio, or in your studio if it's not at home, and then you do have those opportunities to get out into the world. And travel, I missed a great deal as well.
Yeah, sure.
But there were positives in that I think my work took a different direction, because it became, you know, I would go down to the River Spey and sit on the ground and draw this tiny little community of plants. I simply did that in the garden in Edinburgh. And that was quite important to me. I realised that actually it was just as important to me, that environment, maybe not as important in a different sort of way. But it was the personal contact, and the fact I've not done any teaching at Edinburgh Printmakers, because wood engraving, difficult to learn, and that's something which, you know, you miss.
And I mean, if you put yourself in the position of an art student today, I mean, I think in a way you've already answered this, and Emma was talking about this as well. But having to be taught online, what do you think they'll have lacked the most? Is it just the interaction with each other, or?
Yes, it's the interaction with each other and with tutors, to be face to face with somebody, because you know, Zoom is an amazing, thank goodness we've got Zoom at the moment, but there's not, you don't get the same subtleties of in the interaction. But I know it's, you know, the courses that have been run at LSA have been great for the students, and that Emma was obviously has benefited a great deal from them. But I think also it's that the friendships they develop with each other, the students and with the tutors, but you know, seeing what each other are doing, and also to be motivated is very hard, because you're only just starting out learning in your artistic career, and to have to be entirely self-motivated. I know obviously you gave LSA is giving a lot of support, but to have just be, as Emma said, she walks in and has a cup of tea and has a chat. Exactly. And all of those things are just absolutely vital. So I think to be missing out on that, also the opportunities to see each other's work in the flesh, to exhibit, to have people come in to see their work, is all valuable.
Absolutely.
That they're not having so much at the moment.
Thank you, Angie. We have got some time to spare, I believe, for questions from the audience. I think we have had comments and questions trickling into the chat box. What I'm going to do is just hand over temporarily to Camille, who is actually the fundraiser at the school, responsible for leading the Resilience Fund campaign. So, Camille, you've been fielding questions. Is there anything you'd like to pass on to Angie?
Well, thank you first, Angie, for that wonderful talk. It's so wonderful to hear from you, and as you say, in this time of really having a lack of being able to engage in art, this has been a really special moment, so thanks for joining us. We actually have only had one question.
They might start coming now, though,
so
if we hang on. Anybody want to type something in? Now's your last chance. Please
do you know, put your questions in the chat box. Actually, we've had two questions from our principal, Devison, but we'll go ahead. Which question would you like, Nick? One question from Nick. Hi, Angie. These watercolors remind me of the flattened qualities of Indian miniatures. Are these of interest to you?
Yeah, and I've not really thought of them that way, but yes, they are. I do like Indian miniatures, and I actually really love Indian botanical art. Though actually the ones that I particularly like don't have those qualities. But yeah, I think the colours have become really intense since painting the auriculars. Partly because they are like little jewel-like flowers in themselves. So the backgrounds have become really bright and textured, and yeah, I can see that there's that sort of link. And also because I often decorate, the pots that I use for my still lives are often decorated. And the way those patterns flow off, and they often have oriental influences in the stylization of those. So yeah, definitely I can see that there's a comparison there.
I wondered about your colour in particular, Angie, because thinking back to people like Revilius and Borden and co, the colour is often quite subdued, isn't it? From that, and you associate that post-war period with sort of sober colours. And your recent watercolours do seem to be intensifying in terms of colours. So is that a direction you're interested in?
Well, yeah, because I think what I've been doing lately in the Scottish Gallery exhibition, I had this contrast between the native flowers and the dried seed heads and the pebbles and the seaweeds, and then the cultivated plants.
Right.
And I made this conscious decision that the cultivated plants would be really quite exotic. So things like dahlias and auriculas, primulas and other primulas and things like that. So actually, they do have very intense saturated colours. So I quite like, hopefully this strand will or two strands will carry on in my work where we have the more muted, because, you know, Revilius and Borden and Nash, they were such ultimately very, very, or probably ultimately English artists, actually. Yeah. That sort of chalky Sussex kind of landscape, and which Norfolk was like that as well, that East Anglian landscape. Whereas it's coming to Scotland, my work has actually become more colourful, but coinciding with the you know, depicting dahlias and garden flowers like that.
We do have another question from Catherine Davidson, and that is, do you concentrate on one work at a time and see it through to completion?
Yes, I do. Sometimes I will tweak things at the, you know, a few days later. If I've moved on to something else, I will go back. But on the whole, yeah, I do tend to start painting and finish it. I quite like that feeling. And maybe that's tied in with the sort of printmaking thing as well. I find it quite frustrating with a print if I've, you know, cut 3 blocks and part way there and then just leave it. I find that quite hard. So yeah, I do pretty much concentrate on one.
And another question to follow on from that is from Philly Nickel, who has asked me, asked you, can you tell me roughly how long it takes to set up and execute, for example, the print of the jug
Oh, well, that was an absolute epic, that one. I think the main black block, you know, with the detailed drawing of the jug, would have taken me, I see, I never time it, but it must be well over a week to cut up that one block. But the other blocks are simpler. So yeah, I have actually never timed it, but they do take a long time to do, but you have that sort of benefit of the multiple, which I really like. So I never mind spending that much time. I sort of become absorbed into the process, actually. I think, as I was saying, you know, different mindsets at different stages in the process.
It would be a bit worrying if you could tell how long it took, wouldn't it?
I think it would. Yeah, I think it would, actually. But yeah, I am quite a sort of, I'm very good at concentrating in on things. And sometimes I think it would be amazing to be a person that could do, you know, amazing monoprints sort of really quickly and spontaneously. But I enjoy process ultimately, I think.
And Callum Smith has asked, how do you arrive at a colour palette for the prints? And I was thinking about this as well myself.
Well, it starts with the landscape and the plants that I've chosen to depict, really, but the image does change. So I will often set down a first colour, and then the colours I had intended can change. You know, as I say with the prints, they kind of become an end of themselves. So actually, often the end, the finished images often can be quite different to how I start out, and that I actually quite like that. And maybe it doesn't even bear a resemblance to the plants, the actual plants themselves. In the end, it can actually be quite different.
Okay.
I take it, Angie, you're not tempted by using the computer as a tool in that respect.
Oh,
in terms of colorways.
I couldn't even operate the slideshow entirely on my own. So I don't think Photoshop or whatever is anything.
Very good.
I don't really know. When I design my textiles, I print them all as lino blocks. You know, I print a repeat pattern and then make a collage of it. And then once I've done that and worked it out, then Simon, my husband, he then scans it in, and they're screen printed. They're not block printed fabric when they're produced. Right. So yeah, they do go through a stage where they're digital, but no, it's not for me. I'm not happy. No. I'm relatively happy in front of a screen, but not to work too much on the screen.
And we have a really interesting question from Andrew Mackenzie, and he's saying that you're of course deeply inspired by the natural world, and today is World Earth Day, and he's wondering, you know, would you say that you're connected with the environmental movement in terms of climate change, biodiversity, plant life, etc.?
Yes, I am. I do have a bit of an interest in that, and I do worry on a sort of a more intimate level. Like, I worry about our connectedness with it as people, you know, and that's something that actually during the pandemic has been quite interesting. That people have talked more about their relationship with the natural world. I think we have lost contact with it, and I think there's been something has happened in the last year where people have become more aware of their natural environment. So yeah, I do, and I think in terms of biodiversity, I think there's a lot that we must do to try and reclaim a relationship with the natural world, actually. So yeah, I do. I mean, I'm not particularly, my work has got doesn't particularly make any comment about it, but I think as I spend so much time in actually quite wild parts of the world, and feel very fortunate to be able to do so, you know, I think it's vital that we value it. And it seems interesting that increasingly, you know, we watch how more people are out in their gardens observing wildlife. So that has to be one small benefit of what people have been going through in the past months as well, possibly.
Angie, one thing that strikes me about some of those images you've shown us is that you're really getting down to almost an insect's view of the plants. Yeah. You're right down amongst these little organisms. Yeah. And that strikes me as quite significant, that it's not an anthropocentric view. You're not looking down on the ground from above. You're getting down to the ground. Yeah, and also, and I think that's quite significant.
Yeah, and also that plants form communities and need each other for healthy ecosystem needs this diverse range of plants. And so, yeah, I suppose by getting down and observing it in that way, you realize how entwined literally things are.
And I just think it's so amazing that teacher of yours, when you were 9 years old, telling you to focus on that little patch of earth inside the quadrant, that sets you off.
Yeah, yeah. I think it did. I really think it did. And I used to spend a lot of time on my own as a child in the garden because we didn't live near other people. And I was always sort of making daisy chains and playing with grasses and weaving things. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to wax lyrical about sort of this idyllic childhood in the countryside, but there was something about that time spent on my own with nature, I think has come through into my adult life.
I think we have maybe one more.
Okay.
Time for one more question. There's a question from Susie Reed about how you choose your printing method by subject matter.
Oh, I see. How I decide which process to use. I think when I've made an initial sketch, it sort of tells me what it's going to be. It's often to do with scale. So if I want to do, say I want to do the Eric Ravilius alphabet mug, which people might know, but it's basically a mug which has these beautifully copper plate engraved alphabet and little icons, you know, A is for apple, B is for balloon, or whatever those things are. And I feel that has to really be a screen print or a very fine wood engraving to get that detail. That wouldn't be achievable in lino unless it was enormous. So sometimes what I'm drawing just tells me what it should be. And sometimes it's just if I've drawn in a certain way, I think I really want to hold on to that texture. Therefore, I'm going to do a screen print because then I can use the true grain film and then use crayon and engine ink and spattering and create that quality. Whereas it may be if I've drawn some grasses and yellow rattle, it implies something more graphic, and I would go for a lino cut or a wood engraving.
Okay.
Thanks.
We're running out of time rather fast, aren't we? Thank you, Camille. Angie, there's one last question I'd like to ask, really returning to the main theme of the evening, which is, would you like to say, from your point of view, why you're keen to support this LSA's Resilience Fund appeal?
Well, I think, and as I said, a lot of it's been said by Nick and Emma and by Jenny as well. It's the fact that I value art education enormously. I mean, I wouldn't be where I am now if it hadn't been for the art education I've been given by the great foundation course I had in Cheshire, followed by Central, and all the art schools I've used in between to use their print facilities and to do postgrad courses in glass and all these different things that I've done. And it's because somewhere like LSA is independent, it's unique, it's got a strong sense of community, it's got staff that have been there a long time and are excellent at what they do, and they support their students enormously, whether or not it's somebody like Emma who has gone from school, foundation and gone on to art education, or whether it's someone that's come back after a break from art or someone that's not done it before. It's enables people from different backgrounds and different economic backgrounds to participate. So therefore you get this diversity within the community. So yeah, I just feel it's very important that people are able to achieve a creative life and do that in a institution, a place where they feel included and it's positive, and obviously gets really good results as well. And it's so uplifting. So yeah, that's
that's a great description of Leith School of Art. Thank you, Angie. Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Well, thank you for asking me to do it.
Well, it was a really inspiring introduction to your work, and thank you again for supporting the school in this way by taking part this evening. It's been absolutely great, and we're getting so many messages of appreciation pouring in now. So it only remains for me to hand over to Alistair Hector, the chair of Leith School of Art, who's going to round off this evening's proceedings. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for your skillful facilitation of a truly wonderful conversation with our principal guest. And Angie, I have to say, you've given me an almost impossible task. How do I follow that? How do I follow that? I just can't thank you enough for agreeing to be our keynote speaker this evening and for your endorsement of this very, very important venture for Leith School of Art, about which you spoke so beautifully and so movingly. Thank you. Nick did say at the beginning that we were in for a treat, and you've given us that and more. It's just been a delight, a real delight and an enrichment to hear you speak and to see your work. And if ever we needed a reminder of why artists and the work they produce are so important in this world, well, Angie, you and your work are that reminder. It's just been wonderful. Thank you so very, very much. And I'd like to thank everyone who's joined this meeting, wherever you've joined us from. And in fact, there are far more of you than we could possibly have accommodated in the school. Of course, we'd have liked to have met you in person, but in this instance, Zoom has enabled a much bigger gathering that would have been possible otherwise. And you're all very welcome. It's quite hard for me as the tail end Charlie at an event like this to avoid touching on some things which have been said before, and I can't say them nearly as eloquently as others have said them, but there's no harm in echoing some of the key messages from an evening like this, because we are all genuinely singing from the same song sheet. And as you know, this evening is all about coming together in support of Leith School of Art, which is this gem of an art school so dear to so many of us here. In my case, there's the privilege currently of serving as chair of the board of directors. but I have a long personal connection with the school, which goes back to the time of its founding, and a close friendship with the founders, Mark and Lottie Cheverton. So I do know a bit about the story of Leith School of Art and its perseverance through so many challenges over the decades. Of course, many of you know that the school may well have closed just 3 years after it opened, when the untimely death of Mark and Lottie Cheverton themselves happened. Jenny has talked about the fire some years ago. But apart from these disasters, I think it probably is fair to say that nothing has challenged Leith School of Art quite so much as the COVID emergency has. I've mentioned the Chevertons, and I'd like to say that my wife and I, of course, have several pieces by them at home, one of which you can perhaps glimpse over my right shoulder on the wall behind. And if you could give me a second, I'm just going to share it on screen now. And there we go. We have some of Mark's prints, because of course Mark himself was a supremely accomplished printmaker. But this is a mixed 3D relief, mixed media 3D relief by Lottie, which shows a fish and some bread, and is inspired by the New Testament account of the feeding of the 5,000. Mark and Lottie, as many of you know, were people of deep Christian faith who believed, as I do, in a generous creator God and the transformative power of art as a God-given gift. And I'm showing this piece not just to honor them and their faith, but also because it seems to me so apt for this evening, telling as it does a story of a miraculous multiplying of resources to provide for people who were hungry and people who were vulnerable. It speaks to me of generosity and compassion, which were intrinsic to the Cheverton's vision, a vision that is of an inspiring, inclusive art school, which is generous in its welcome and nurturing of all who come to learn here, irrespective of their backgrounds and their means, and irrespective of their artistic experience, all who wanted to learn art in Mark and Lottie's time and still are welcome here. And that vision is still deeply woven into Leith School of Art's ethos, values, and its objectives today. I'll stop sharing now. So Leith School of Art has survived, and the fact that the school has not just survived, but flourished for 33 years, making a huge impact in the lives of many, many artists of all generations. That's thanks to the people of Leith School of Art, and particularly its staff and students. It's been great to have the staff and students represented so powerfully by Jenny and Emma this evening, and I'd like to thank both of them. Resilience, as you know, is the watchword of the fund we're launching tonight. And with that in mind, I'd like to say this. There's no shortage of resilience amongst the people of Leith School of Art. Their resilience, of course, has been tested to the limit by the pandemic. And I just can't let this opportunity pass without thanking and paying tribute to Nick Devison, our principal since just over a year ago, and his wonderful team of tutors and support staff. They have done truly outstanding work throughout the lockdowns and that strange inter-lockdown period we had last autumn. And without their perseverance, energy, and imagination, Leith School of Art simply could not have kept going in the amazing way it has since COVID struck. So, Nick and colleagues, now is the time for you to take a virtual bow and receive the virtual applause, which I can hear already, of everyone watching this tonight. Thank you all so much. And thank you to our students, many of you in the audience here tonight. You've been so wonderfully supportive and loyal in sticking with your courses through these most testing of times to be a student. I'd hate to have been a student during lockdown, but you've shown determination, resourcefulness, and adaptability. So bravo to you all too. So what I'm saying is, in terms of human resources, there is resilience in abundance at Leith School of Art. However, it's an understatement to say that our resilience in other respects has been dented by the pandemic. For example, think of our buildings. As most of you know, I'm sure, our buildings are not large. So imagine the task, which I put on a par with designing a new TARDIS for Doctor Who, of refitting the studios to enable courses to function here with social distancing and all the other necessary COVID protection measures. Somehow the team did it. And as Nick has already said, we had not a single COVID incident through all of last term. But social distancing has meant putting a cap on student numbers, and that cap is one of the reasons why LSA's finances have been so severely stretched by the impacts of COVID. We've already heard about some of the others. They include a significant loss of income through the enforced cancellation of last summer term's short course program. Then there was the disruption of our ever popular studio-based summer school, although I do have to say that the reimagined online version was a great example of what can be done online, and it was a great success in its own terms. And then there's been the ban on big gatherings of the sort that we usually get at exhibitions. That also has had an impact. I could tell you more if I had time, but please look out for your copy of the Case for Support document, which will come to you after this evening. And if you'd like to know more about the financial background to this fundraising initiative, please do get in touch. Now, please don't let what I've just said sound alarm bells about Leith School of Art's future. Leith School of Art, as it has done in the past, will survive this crisis. I can say that with absolute confidence. But can I say this? Survival mode and firefighting is not how we want to carry on after COVID. The school has ambitions way beyond mere survival. And again, forgive me if I repeat some of the things that have already been said, as Nick has. Development of the curriculum, consolidation of our digital platform to make learning opportunities at Leith available to an even wider catchment, broadening access and participation through assisted places, schools outreach and community classes, improvement of our beautiful but cramped and yes, somewhat aging facilities. These are all on the plan. And we're more convinced than ever of the value, the importance of the school's work with regard to well-being and mental health for people of all ages and backgrounds, and in particular the young and the vulnerable. And if ever there was a time when people will cry out for the life-enhancing, restorative power of the arts, this surely, post-pandemic, is it. Leith School of Art stands ready to play its part in the healing of our society post-COVID. We are committed and we want to play our part in building the future visual arts culture of Scotland, while providing a unique form of investment in our young. So in closing, and you won't be surprised by this, I have a request to make on behalf of Leith School of Art, and it's this. Please will you give generously to help us establish the new LSA Resilience Fund. £100,000 is the target, and with your help, I know we can do it. I'm delighted to be able to share with you that we're already off to a flying start, as £25,000 has already been received in advanced pledges, and that's just wonderful. The Case for Support leaflet, which you will receive, contains two very moving examples of how LSA has helped actual students. It describes what different gifts can achieve in the future, and it explains the ways in which you can support the school, the easiest of which is to use the donate button on the LSA website. Please will you help us to match the resilience of Leith School of Art's people with resilience in the school's fabric and finance. Both are vital right now to enable Leith School of Art to emerge strongly from the pandemic and to be in a position to continue the visionary work started by the Chevertons all those years ago. Thank you so much for your kindness in joining us, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Goodbye and very best wishes to you all from everyone here at Leith School of Arts. Thank you and good evening.